Welcome to today's episode. In this video, we delve into the story of Adrianne Reynolds, a young woman with a bright future, whose life was cut short in a crime that shocked an entire community. Adrianne Reynolds was born on September 12, 1988, in Kilgore, Texas. Described by those who knew her as vibrant and determined, Adrianne grew up in a loving, yet sometimes challenging environment. Her biological parents divorced when she was young, leading her to split her time between households. Adrianne was a curious and creative child, often described as full of energy and dreams. By her teenage years, she had developed a passion for the arts, particularly singing, and dreamed of one day becoming a performer.
Adrianne loved to sing. That was her dream, was to be a singer.
However, Adrianne's teenage years were marked by struggles with fitting in and grappling with self-esteem, often exacerbated by turbulent peer relationships and the typical challenges of adolescence. These struggles eventually led her to move in with her father and stepmother in East Moline, Illinois, hoping for a fresh start and a stable path forward. At 16, Adrianne enrolled in the Black Hawk College Outreach Center, an alternative school aimed at helping at-risk students. Here, Adrianne's life intersected with two individuals who would ultimately become central to her life, Sarah Kolb and Gregory. Sarah Kolb was a confident and somewhat intimidating figure at school. Known for her goth appearance, love for alternative music, and outspoken personality, Sarah cultivated an image of authority within her social circle. She had a reputation for being both charismatic and domineering, traits that made her a natural leader, but also caused friction with those who crossed her. Gregory, Sarah's friend and frequent companion, was quieter, but equally influenced by a rebellious streak. Cory had a complex background, marked by a desire to fit in and prove himself to others. Drawn to Sarah's strong personality, Cory often acted as a loyal follower, eager to gain her approval. The duo's friendship thrived on shared interests, but it also bred a dynamic of dependency and mutual reinforcement of negative behaviors. Eventually, Adrianne bonded with Sarah and Cory over common ground, such as their shared experiences at school and interests in alternative culture. On January 21, 2005, Adrianne made plans to meet Sarah and Cory at a local Taco Bell after school. When she didn't return home, her family grew worried and reported her missing. The police started an intensive investigation into her disappearance. Flyers were posted, friends and family were interviewed, and a search effort was launched. Detectives meticulously retraced her steps, speaking with classmates and examining her interactions in the days leading up to her disappearance. As detectives started piecing together the timeline of her last known whereabouts, they uncovered startling inconsistencies in the stories of those she had spent the day with. They began to piece together a narrative that pointed to foul play. As investigators dug deeper, their attention turned to Sarah Kolb and Gregory, two individuals who were reportedly the last to see Adrianne. They were taken in for questioning by the police in the disappearance of Adrianne. At first, Sarah and Cory maintained that they had parted ways with Adrianne amicably. However, their accounts began to diverge under scrutiny. Friends of the pair reported overhearing troubling conversations, and the police were increasingly convinced that the two were withholding critical information.
Adrianne really wanted to be Sarah's friend. That was all Adrianne wanted from Sarah, and Sarah didn't really want to be Adrianne's friend.
She thought Sarah was cool because Sarah had a car, and Sarah would take her to McDonald's, get a hamburger, and buy her food.
Sarah was really nice. She was nice to everybody. She got along with everybody. And then all of a sudden this girl comes and it's a totally different story. She just sits there and, says, I'm going to kill her. She goes, I will kill her. I am not scared to do anything like that.
And Kolb's trying.
She had a hate for Adrianne. A big hate.
Where'd the hate stem from?
Boys.
But did Sarah Kolb tell you?
Just that she wished she could kill her. She wanted her dead.
Van Born.
The breakthrough came after days of intense questioning. Detectives noted Gregory's increasingly nervous demeanor during interviews, and the pressure seemed to mount with each passing hour. Initially, Cory stuck to a story that aligned with Sarah's account. They had simply dropped Adrianne off at a nearby location. But inconsistencies in his statements began to emerge. Investigators used these inconsistencies to push harder, suggesting that they already knew more than he thought. They appealed to his conscience, emphasizing Adrianne's family's pain and the importance of telling the truth. Finally, under the weight of his guilt and the relentless questioning, Cory broke down and confessed. He revealed that the reason for the tragedy was a growing tension between Adrianne and Sarah, fueled by jealousy. Cory spoke of how Sarah's jealousy had festered over time, eating away at her. He described the way Sarah's eyes would darken whenever Adrianne entered a room, how she bristled whenever boys gravitated toward Adrianne. Sarah felt invisible, Cory admitted, his voice low, almost regretful. Cory explained how Sarah's insecurities deepened when even he seemed to notice Adrianne. Sarah had found validation in Cory, but the idea that he could be drawn to Adrianne, like everyone else, drove her over the edge. She hated how Adrianne got all the attention, Cory said, his hands trembling as he recounted the events. She thought, if Adrianne wasn't around anymore, it would be different. People would finally see her. Cory's confession revealed a disturbing truth. Sarah wasn't just jealous of Adrianne's charm. She resented what it made her feel about herself, small, unimportant, replaceable. That jealousy turned into an obsession, and she roped Cory into her plan, framing it as a way for them to solidify their bond. She said we had to do it together, Cory whispered, that it would prove I cared about her more than anyone else. The day it happened, Adrianne had no idea what was coming. To her, Sarah was a friend, not a rival plotting against her. Cory's voice cracked as he described how they lured Adrianne to a Taco Bell to scare her, how Sarah's jealousy hardened into resolve, and how the lines between fear and anger blurred until it was too late to turn back. She thought she'd feel better, Cory confessed, staring down at his hands. But I don't think anything could fill that hole inside her. Cory's statements gave investigators the information they needed to locate Adrianne's remains, leading to a series of grim discoveries that confirmed his account and implicated Sarah Kolb as the primary instigator. With Cory's confession, law enforcement was able to locate Adrianne's remains, scattered in multiple locations as part of a calculated effort to cover up the crime.
A body was located in Blackhawk State Park, is believed to be that of Adrianne Reynolds. A 16-year-old female from East Moline has been arrested for first-degree murder.
However, Cory and Sarah hadn't acted alone in the aftermath. Nathan Gaudet, another acquaintance, had been brought in by the pair to assist in the concealment of Adrianne's body. Nathan helped dismember Adrianne's remains. Together, Sarah, Cory, and Nathan drove Adrianne's body to Sarah's grandfather's farm, a remote and secluded property that they believed would provide the cover they needed to dispose of the remains. The trio worked methodically, each playing a role in the macabre task. Using tools found on the farm, they attempted to destroy evidence of the crime by dismembering and burning Adrianne's body in a fire pit. The group hoped the intense flames would consume any trace of her remains. But when this method proved insufficient, they resorted to scattering what remained in multiple locations nearby. Sarah Kolb's defense team attempted to portray the incident as an unplanned and spontaneous altercation that tragically escalated. They argued that Sarah's role had been exaggerated and that the intent to kill was never premeditated. However, the prosecution presented a damning narrative, supported heavily by Cory's detailed testimony. Cory described Sarah as the driving force behind the crime, painting her as a figure consumed by anger and jealousy. He recounted chilling details of Sarah's behavior during and after the crime, which included coldly orchestrating the disposal of Adrianne's remains. The jury listened as Cory revealed how he was drawn into Sarah's web of control, his loyalty manipulated to serve her calculated efforts to evade suspicion. A witness who later spoke to a local TV broadcaster recounted the unsettling events they observed in the parking lot on the day Adrianne disappeared.
Connie and Vern Bennett were grabbing a quick bite to eat here at the Taco Bell in Moline last January 21st and found themselves in the middle of a murder case after noticing a car rocking back and forth in the parking lot.
My wife told me, said, look over there. I think there's somebody fighting in that car.
Prosecutors say Adrianne Reynolds was in the throes of being beaten and strangled in the back seat. Today for the jury, the Bennetts identified Sarah Kolb as the girl they saw in the front passenger seat, but couldn't see the back seat and never saw Kolb fighting with anyone.
Staring straight ahead and looking afraid.
You thought she looked afraid?
Yeah, I thought she had a afraid look on her face, like she was scared.
Today.
After deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty for Sarah Kolb on charges of first-degree murder and concealment of a homicidal death.
A big thumbs up for the guilty verdict from the family of Adrianne Reynolds. Today's conviction of Sarah Kolb for murder, the best they could hope for.
I don't know if I feel good or I'm just glad it's over.
After 2 trials in 4 months, finally, they say, there was justice for Adrianne. It was in their faces, and now on their cars in the courthouse parking lot.
I don't think you'll ever have closure, but I think it gives some kind of a feeling of justice for Adrianne, because that's what we're all here about, is justice for Adrianne. That's kind of been our motto these days, and I think we're all just pleased to be here. And she's not going to walk, so she needs to go away for a long time.
Sarah Kolb now faces up to 65 years in prison for the murder of the pretty teen from Texas who came to live in the Quad Cities for a better life and ended up dead. It's been a long road for the Reynolds family. Sad, they say, and still so senseless.
Her fatal mistake was trying to befriend Sarah Kolb. That was her fatal mistake. Sorry, it wouldn't help me none. Still wouldn't bring Adrianne back.
But you feel a little better today?
Maybe after a while.
Okay.
Today, Kolb stopped short of admitting to killing Adrianne, saying, "I made a mistake I can't help but regret. I know I could have done more to stop what happened." Kolb told the judge she became good at not feeling, saying, "I felt no feeling when she died."
I don't think she's got any feelings.
Sarah she doesn't have a conscience. I don't think she cares. She's only sorry she got caught.
The Reynolds both took the witness stand today before Sarah and the judge, asking for the max.
I looked right at her and said, because she is evil and she deserves the max for what she did.
She received a sentence of 53 years in prison. Cory, though complicit, was granted some leniency for his cooperation and confession, resulting in a 45-year sentence. Both sentences reflected the gravity of their actions, yet the devastating impact of their choices would linger far beyond the courtroom.
It was after Kolb's testimony, Gregory decided to meet with News 8's Chris Miner from jail.
You could have saved Adrian's life.
I don't know if he can even answer that now.
Can you live with that?
Speculation.
I don't know.
I'm going to advise you not to answer. This gets into the facts of the case.
Can you please tell me why? Why this happened?
I don't really know why this happened, you know. It was basically just a fight, and it went too far.
Nathan pleaded guilty to his involvement and was sentenced to 5 years in a juvenile detention facility due to his age at the time of the offense. He served nearly 4 years before being released on November 11th, 2008. Tragically, Nathan's life was cut short just a few years after his release. On April 16th, 2012, he died in a car accident in Indiana. While Nathan's involvement and subsequent fate are often overshadowed by the primary perpetrators, his role serves as a stark reminder of how the crime drew others into its orbit of destruction. For some, Nathan's release and later death marked the closing of a chapter, but for others, it added yet another layer of sorrow to an already devastating story. The tragedy of Adrianne Reynolds' death continues to resonate. However, in 2022, both Sarah Kolb and Cory Gregory have intensified their efforts to alter the narrative surrounding their roles in the crime. Sarah has filed new appeals for a reduced sentence, claiming that her youth at the time of the crime should be a significant factor in reconsideration. Her legal team asserts that Sarah has demonstrated genuine remorse and made significant progress toward rehabilitation during her years of incarceration. Meanwhile, Cory Gregory, now known as Harley Quinn, after transitioning while in prison, has also sought a reduced sentence. Harley's legal team has highlighted their cooperation with law enforcement during the investigation and their pivotal testimony against Sarah as grounds for leniency. Harley has publicly expressed regret for their involvement in the crime, stating that the burden of guilt has been a constant presence in their life. The appeals, however, have been met with resistance. Adrianne's family remains steadfast in their belief that the original sentences reflect the severity of the crime. They argue that the calculated nature of the murder and the callousness displayed in its aftermath should not be overlooked, regardless of the defendant's subsequent actions.
And thank you. Today, the man convicted for his role in the death of Adrianne Reynolds 17 years ago is expected to be resentenced. That's being credited to new case law in the state of Illinois, allowing Cory Gregory to challenge his original sentence. And News 8's David Bowman is live outside the Rock Island County Justice Center this morning, telling us what we can expect in the courtroom today. David?
Yeah, at 9:30 this morning, Cory Gregory is expected to be given a new sentence for the role that he played in the death of Adrianne Reynolds 17 years ago. That's going to be taking place here at the Rock Island County Justice Center, but right now Cory Gregory is down there at the Rock Island County Jail. Cory Gregory was 17 years old at the time he was given a 45-year sentence in the death of Adrianne Reynolds. And in the state of Illinois, that's considered a de facto life sentence. That means he would spend most, if not all, of his life behind bars. But an Illinois Supreme Court ruling in 2019 found that juveniles given a sentence of more than 40 years in length is considered a true life sentence, and certain criteria must be met in order to give a child a life sentence. So Cory Gregory filed for an appeal, and it was granted, vacating that original sentence. Meanwhile, the Reynolds family tells me that at the end of Cory's time in prison, he would be a free man, which is more than they can say for Adrianne.
There's a difference, and I know the difference between a life sentence and 40 years. When you're inside, if you got a life sentence, it's called you don't have a time card. He has a time card.
At today's resentencing, we're expected to hear testimony from the psychiatrist who was tasked with giving Cory Gregory a psych exam back in June. It's part of the criteria needed to hand down a de facto life sentence to a child. And I spoke with the prosecuting attorney about how it could be possible to give such an exam for a crime that took place nearly 2 decades ago. He told me from his perspective, these exams, when given years later, are an imperfect look in the rearview mirror. But Josh, the idea is to better understand where Cory's brain development may have been 17 years ago at the time of this crime and how it may have played a part into the death of Adrianne.
This morning, we've learned that Cory Gregory is now known as Harley Quinn. She's in the process of a gender-reaffirming transition. From here on, we will refer to the former Cory Gregory as Harley Quinn and use she/her pronouns. NewsAid's David Bowman has been at the courthouse since the gavel dropped at 9:30 this morning. David, what can you tell us about what's happened so far this morning?
Well, Josh, there were several surprising things. You mentioned that Cory Gregory, now known as Harley Quinn, that was the first thing that the judge said as soon as we got started this morning. We were also told by guards that this could take up to 7 hours, and it took about an hour and a half. So lots of several things that were very surprising. One of the things that we've been talking about for weeks is that psych exam that we were looking forward to hearing the results of. That was ordered back in June. One of the stipulations needed in order to give a child a de facto life sentence or a sentence of more than 40 years. You'll remember that Cory Gregory, Harley Quinn, was sentenced to 45 years in prison for the murder and concealment of a body of 16-year-old Adrianne Reynolds. So that was placed into as secondary evidence, and the defense had argued that a 20-year sentence would be more appropriate. Shortly after that, Johanns Reynolds, Adrianne's stepmom, took the stand and said that that is just simply not the case, that Adrianne's life is worth more than 20 years. Shortly after that, Cory Gregory, Harley Quinn, took the stand and spoke directly to the Reynolds family. Take a look.
You know, if I could give my life, I would. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't make a difference. I know you will never forgive me, and I would never ask for it because I do not deserve your forgiveness. And every single day, I wish I could bring her back. You know, it never leaves me.
And one of the things, as that was happening, you could see the Reynolds family just shaking their heads. I could hear them crying. You could just tell how emotional it was that they were having to listen to all of that. And the judge ended the hearing by saying that your sentence was partially negotiated. The only thing that you could have argued would have been withdrawing your guilty plea 17 years ago. And that was not the case here today. They were trying to get a lower sentence. So they reaffirmed the original sentence of 40 years for murder and 5 years for concealment of a body. Josh, I'll toss it back to you.
Tonight, we start hearing from the father of Adrianne Reynolds after one of her killers, Sarah Kolb, was denied a reduced sentence. Adrianne Reynolds was killed in 2005 by Kolb and another person who now goes by the name Harley Quinn. Kolb was convicted and sentenced to 53 years in prison.
Joe McCoy spoke with Adrianne's parents this afternoon and joins us in studio to explain what's new. Joe, what were the grounds for the appeal?
Yeah, well, her lawyers argue that her sentencing was cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment, now since she was 16 at the time of the murder. The main basis for her appeal being a 2019 Illinois Supreme Court ruling that stated that any sentence over 40 years for a juvenile is considered a life sentence.
And the other convicted killer tried for a reduced sentence as well, is that right?
Yeah, so that is correct. Quinn had been looking for her sentence to be reduced to 20 years, but she was denied that last March. Right now, Adrianne's dad just wants the two killers to serve their proper time.
Probably what would she be doing today? You know, she loved to sing, and maybe she would have went to American Idol or one of them things, or at least tried anyway. Just hug your kids, because you never know.